Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show where we dig into a whole pile of sources, pull out the key bits, and we'll basically give you a shortcut to getting really informed on a topic. And today, oh boy, we are plunging into one of the absolute greatest survival stories ever told. It's a saga of just incredible human endurance against, frankly, impossible odds. Our deep dive today comes from this really compelling account found in a YouTube video transcript, all about Sir Ernest Shackleton's legendary endurance expedition.
And our mission, as always, is to really pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge for you, the key insights from this incredible saga. We want you to understand not just, the sequence of events, what happened, but why it matters, why this story of resilience and leadership facing what honestly seemed like total doom is so important. What can it possibly teach us about overcoming things that seem truly unthinkable?
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's November 4th, 1914. You've got Britain's endurance ship, this really sturdy vessel, sailing right into some of the most dangerous waters on the planet. Destination: Antarctica. On board, 28 people. And yeah, exactly, 28 is right, because there was actually a stowaway, a young guy named Blackborough, not even on the official list, leading them, man himself, Sir Ernest Shackleton. And his goal, it was incredibly audacious, to be the very first to cross the entire Antarctic continent on foot.
Yeah, it's hard to even wrap your head around the scale of that ambition, especially back then. I mean, think about it. No modern tech, no GPS, certainly no smartphones, nothing like that. They were heading into temperatures that could hit minus 50 Celsius, facing constant blizzards, just brutal conditions. So the Endurance first stopped at South Georgia Island. That was November 5th, 1914. Basically the last human outpost before, well, nothingness. And the locals there, the whalers, they warned Shackleton. They told him the Weddell sea ice was looking particularly bad that year, really treacherous. But Shackleton, he was determined. He was going ahead.
And he did push on. But trouble found them very quickly. By December 5th, just a month later, the Weddell sea ice was far heavier, far denser than they expected. Still, Shackleton pushed forward.
And then, bam, January 18th, 1915, the ship gets completely trapped, frozen solid in the ice. They were maybe only 50 yards, like half a football field, from a big crack in the ice, maybe 15 feet wide, a potential escape route. They pushed the engines full throttle for 3 solid hours. Nothing. Didn't move an inch. Some of the crew even got out with axes and chisels, trying to hack away at the ice. Imagine that. Just futile against the power of the frozen sea. So the ship, stuck fast, just started drifting with the ice pack. It moved them about 60 miles away from where they'd actually planned to land, Fossil Bay.
Right, so weeks just turned into months. And then the Antarctic winter hits full force. We're talking 24 hours of darkness, bitter, relentless cold. And the pressure from the ice all around the ship, it started to visibly crush the Endurance. It wasn't subtle. We actually have these incredible photographs, don't we, from Frank Hurley, the ship's photographer. They show the ice just squeezing, splintering the ship. It's chilling to see. The signs were unmistakable. By September 30th, 1915, you could see clear cracks appearing on the ship's sides. When you saw those cracks, I mean, Shackleton must have known, right? Even with his optimism.
Oh, absolutely. He was always putting on a brave face for the men. That was key to his leadership. But seeing those cracks, he must have known deep down. And then came the moment, October 24th, 1915, just before 7 p.m. The pressure became too intense. The ice just burst upward, shattered the stern post of the Endurance. Water started flooding in. The crew pumped relentlessly for 3 days in minus 8.5 Celsius water. Remember, that's incredibly cold. Agonizing. But the water poured in faster than they could pump it out. Some men were even outside trying to cut ice away from the hull, desperately trying to relieve the pressure. But it was hopeless. Shackleton finally had to give the order, abandon ship.
And as they were leaving, stepping off their home onto the ice, one of the crew members, Tom McLeod, he said something just heartbreaking. He said, "I don't think we'll ever get home." You could just feel the despair in that.
Yeah. The ship's final moments came on October 27th. A loud bang as the stern lifted maybe 20 feet out of the water. The rudder, the stern post, ripped right off, timber splintering everywhere. The bow filled rapidly with water, which then froze, just slowly pulling the front of the ship under the ice. And with the Endurance gone, Shackleton's dream of crossing Antarctica shattered, irrevocably broken. The expedition was over, but the fight for their lives, that was just beginning.
And the reality was so stark, they're stranded on a piece of floating ice, middle of the Antarctic Ocean. No radio, no phone, no way to call for help. No one even knew where they were. Just them and the ice.
And think about what they had left. 3 small lifeboats, 1 sledge, essential personal gear, and maybe a month's worth of food rations. That's it. Just sleeping was an immediate challenge. A lot of them just huddled together right on the ice trying not to freeze. Shackleton knew, realistically, the chance of a passing ship finding them was almost impossible. They'd been completely out of contact for over a year.
Shackleton, ever the navigator, he calculated their best bet was Paulet Island, about 550 kilometers away, across that treacherous ice. But here's this amazing bit of irony, isn't it? Paulet Island actually had emergency supplies that Shackleton himself had arranged to be left there 12 years earlier for a Swedish ship that got trapped back in 1903. Can you imagine relying on something you set up over a decade ago?
It really speaks to his foresight, even back then. But okay, how do you get there? They decided to try marching, dragging the boats. Shackleton imposed a strict weight limit for personal stuff, 2 pounds, max. He told them, nothing is more valuable than your life. And he led by example, left his own gold coins, even his Bible, right there on the ice. And Frank Hurley, the photographer, he had to make an agonizing choice. Saved only 150 of his 400 glass plate negatives. Those photos became the crucial historical record of everything they went through.
The struggle for food started almost right away, and it led to just a horrible decision. They had to kill the puppies they'd brought for food. The emotional weight of that, unimaginable. And dragging those boats, they weighed about a ton each, across uneven, broken ice, just brutal work.
And things got worse when the summer temperatures returned slightly. You'd think warmer is better, but no. It softened the ice surface, made it slushy, even harder to haul the heavy boats and sledges. After 3 hours of just backbreaking effort, they'd only managed to cover 1 mile. 1 mile. So Shackleton, being pragmatic, called it off. He decided they'd set up ocean camp right there on the ice floe. The new plan. Hoped the drift of the ice itself would carry them closer to land.
And to keep spirits up, fight off the crushing boredom and despair, Shackleton made sure every single man had a specific job, a task, anything. He knew keeping their minds occupied, maintaining that mental strength, was just as vital as, finding food or staying warm.
And then came another huge psychological blow. November 21st, 1915. The Endurance, which had been sort of visible, trapped in the ice a few kilometers away, suddenly just sank completely, disappeared beneath the ice. They watched it go down, their last physical link to the world they knew, gone.
And then, after a few weeks, the ice floe started drifting the wrong way. It began moving east, taking them further away from land. It must have felt like the Antarctic was actively working against them.
So December 23rd, Shackleton decides, right, let's abandon ocean camp, try walking again. But after just a few kilometers, they hit thin ice, open water leads, impossible to cross. They had to stop again, find another, hopefully sturdier ice floe, and set up yet another camp. The ground was literally shifting beneath their feet.
Food became incredibly scarce now. Rations were down to like 1 biscuit a day. Some diluted milk, cocoa, a tiny bit of this high-fat meat paste called pemmican. They hunted seals and penguins when they could, but it was unpredictable.
And this is where Shackleton's leadership really shines, in a perhaps controversial way. He often, he lied to the crew about how much food they actually had left. He'd reassure them, don't worry, plenty to keep us going. He knew panic or despair over food could break them faster than hunger itself. He understood that their mental state, their belief they could survive, was absolutely paramount. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How much of survival is perception versus reality?
So the new year, 1916, begins. And they're still drifting, still precarious. Then, March 23rd, Shackleton spots land in the distance. Joinville Island. A flicker of hope, surely.
You'd think so, but actually no. Seeing Joinville Island was terrible news. It meant they had drifted so far east that Paulet Island, their original target with the supplies, was now behind them, gone. And Joinville, though only about 57 miles off, was way over to the west, separated by completely impassable pack ice. Worse still, their drift was now clearly taking them towards the Drake Passage, the most dangerous stretch of ocean on the entire planet. That realization must have been utterly terrifying.
Yeah, the Drake Passage, the stats are just horrifying. Waves regularly hitting 12 meters. It's like a 4-story building. Over 20,000 sailors lost there historically, at least 800 shipwrecks. Even now, in 2025, big modern cruise ships find it incredibly challenging. Shackleton knew if they got swept into the Drake Passage in their tiny lifeboats, it was certain death.
And with that ultimate threat looming, their day-to-day survival got even grimmer. Food and water were critical. They were actually reduced to eating dog meat that had gone bad, picking out the less rotten bits. And for drinking water, they had to melt chips of ice in little tins, holding the tins close to their bodies for warmth. You'd get just a few sips from a full tin. Imagine the effort for so little reward.
And remember Blackborough, the stowaway? There's that story where Shackleton, probably half joking and died desperation, had told him early on, if we run out of food, you're first. Thankfully, it didn't come to that. They managed to kill a huge sea leopard, got about 1,000 pounds of meat, and yes, they did end up having to eat their remaining sled dogs, a grim necessity. But for a few months at least, they had enough food to keep going. Then, April 7th, 1916, another sighting. Clarence Island, 83 kilometers to the north. Hope flares again. Maybe this time.
But just like before, hope was snatched away. The wind suddenly changed direction, shifted east, and started blowing them violently away from Clarence Island, away from any land. And worse, the ice floe they were living on started breaking up rapidly under the assault of the waves. It shrunk down to maybe just 50 meters across, far too small, far too dangerous to stay on. This was it. Decision time.
Shackleton knew the ice was no longer an option. He made the call. Everyone into the 3 small boats. They would try to row to Clarence Island, navigating this treacherous maze of drifting icebergs and smaller floes, a desperate gamble on the open sea.
And during this, another terrifying moment that really shows Shackleton's quick thinking. One of the firemen, Ernie Holmes, fell into the freezing water, -°C water. As they were desperately trying to pull him out, the iceberg they were scrambling onto suddenly split right in two in the darkness. Shackleton was separated from the main group, but his voice, calm, commanding, cut through the chaos, guiding them back together. Then he ordered Holness, soaking wet and freezing, to just walk. Walk all night long on the ice floe to generate body heat, dry his clothes. No fire possible. It saved his life. Just incredible presence of mind.
The wind and the ice just kept thwarting them. They had to keep changing their target island. First Clarence, then King George, then another place called Hope. Finally, their last resort before being swept into the Drake Passage was Elephant Island, about 160 kilometers northwest.
Conditions in those open boats were just appalling, temperatures hovering around -8°C, and ironically, being in open water meant less fresh water because they couldn't easily melt ice anymore. Everyone suffered terribly from thirst, lips cracked, throat swollen, swallowing was agony. They actually resorted to eating raw seal meat, partly just to use the blood to help them lubricate their throats enough to swallow the meat itself. Grimm doesn't even begin to cover it.
And then finally a miracle. April 15th, 1916. After 497 days since they'd last seen South Georgia, all 3 boats made it. They landed on Elephant Island. Can you imagine the relief? Feeling solid rock under your feet after nearly 500 days on ice and water, they said that desolate, uninhabited rock felt like nothing to heaven. Pure, unadulterated relief. But it wasn't salvation, was it?
Not even close. The harsh reality hit them immediately. Blackborough's feet were completely frostbitten, basically paralyzed. Another man, Rickinson, had a heart attack right after landing. And Elephant Island itself, utterly desolate, no people, no supplies, no way to communicate. And crucially, no ships ever went near there. It wasn't on any shipping route. So they were on land, yes, but they were still stranded. The fundamental problem getting home hadn't changed at all.
Shackleton pulls out his map again, considers the options. Cape Horn in South America, 800 kilometers northwest. The Falklands, 880 kilometers east. Or South Georgia Island, where they started, a staggering 1,300 kilometers northeast. All seem impossible.
And this is another one of those key Shackleton decisions. He chose South Georgia, the furthest option. It sounds counterintuitive, right? But he believed, based on his knowledge of the winds and currents, that it actually offered the best chance, despite the immense distance. It meant skirting the edge of the Drake Passage, but he calculated it was their most viable route. A huge, calculated gamble.
But he knew the whole crew couldn't make that journey. They were too weak. So, another heartbreaking decision. He would take just 5 men, the fittest ones, in one boat that James carried, the strongest of the 3 lifeboats, and try to reach South Georgia to get help. The other 22 men, they would have to stay on Elephant Island, build a shelter, and just wait. Hope he made it. Hope help would come. So April 24th, 1916, Shackleton and his 5 companions push off from Elephant Island in that small 22-foot open boat, sailing into arguably the most dangerous seas on Earth. The courage that took is just unbelievable.
And the journey itself was hellish. They rode in shifts, maybe 4 hours on, 4 hours off, though rest was almost impossible, constantly wet, freezing cold, seasick, utterly exhausted. Antarctic winter was setting in, so they had maybe 20 hours of darkness each day. They needed those few hours of daylight to use the sextant for navigation, their only tool to find their way across 1,300 kilometers of empty ocean. Massive waves, rogue waves, constantly threatened to swamp them. They were bailing water almost nonstop. The boat nearly sank multiple times. Even eating was an ordeal. They had to lie down flat in the bottom of the pitching boat just to be able to swallow their meager rations.
And there's that incredible moment you mentioned that shows even Shackleton was human. He reached such a low point, such utter frustration, that he started cursing this small bird, a petrel, that was following the boat. It just shows the immense psychological pressure they were under.
Exactly. It's not weakness, it's humanity under duress. It shows the sheer, grinding strain that wears you down no matter how strong you are. But somehow, despite everything, they kept going. They got closer. They were within just 3 miles of South Georgia, land almost in sight. And then a hurricane-force storm hits them, out of nowhere, tossed the boat around like a toy. They thought that was it, after everything, to fail right at the finish line. But then, a few hours later, the storm passed as quickly as it came, and they found themselves just 1 mile offshore. They had to summon every last shred of energy for that final push. Shackleton later said he thought that was the end for them, but slowly, painstakingly, they rode that last mile.
May 10th, 1916. They made it. After 3 weeks in that tiny boat battling that final storm, 522 days after they'd first left South Georgia, they set foot on land again. Apparently just sheer joy erupted. Hugs, relief, disbelief. They had survived the impossible voyage.
But of course, it wasn't over. They'd landed on the wrong side of South Georgia Island, the uninhabited south side. The whaling station, Stromness, the only human settlement, was over 100 kilometers away around the coast. Trying to sail there in their damaged boat. Impossible. Too dangerous. The only other option, go overland, straight across the island's interior, about 29 miles or 47 kilometers. But this interior was uncharted, mountainous, glaciated. No one in history had ever crossed South Georgia on foot. It was considered completely impossible.
And Shackleton, faced with yet another seemingly insurmountable obstacle, just refuses to quit. He decides, right, we're going to attempt the impossible. We're going to cross the island. It's just mind-blowing resilience.
It truly is. But first, they rested. For 9 crucial days, they found a small cave. They hunted the local wildlife, albatrosses, seals, penguins regaining their strength. They knew this trek would demand everything they had left.
May 19th, 1916, 3 in the morning. Shackleton, along with Worsley the navigator and Creasine, another incredibly tough crewman, they set off. They left their sleeping bags behind to travel faster, lighter, just rudimentary gear, ropes and ice axe, facing this unknown, icy wilderness.
And the crossing was harrowing. No map, no path. They kept climbing these huge icy mountains, maybe 10,000 feet high in places. Remember, these aren't hiking trails. This is raw glacier and rock, only to reach the top and find sheer cliffs or impassable crevasses on the other side. They'd have to backtrack, find another way. At one point, they were on a high ridge, fog closing in, darkness falling. Their only way down was a steep, icy slope into the unknown. They roped themselves together, sat down, and just slid, hoping to the best. It was a massive gamble. They had to literally cut steps into sheer ice faces to descend safely. After 36 nonstop hours of climbing, traversing, descending, on May 20th, 1916, they finally saw it. Below them, the Stromness whaling station. And people.
They had done it. Crossed the Allardyce mountain range.
Right.
Made history. The first people ever to cross South Georgia Island on foot. And that feat, it was so incredible, it wasn't repeated until 1955. And that was by a team of expert mountaineers with proper equipment, tents, support. Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean did it with almost nothing but their courage and determination. It's staggering.
And when they arrived at the whaling station, their appearance was shocking. Long, matted hair and beards, faces black with blubber smoke and frostbite, clothes in rags. Apparently, only their eyes were recognizable. The station manager, Thorolf Searle, eventually recognized Shackleton. Remember, everyone assumed Shackleton and his entire crew had been dead for nearly 2 years. Searle immediately got them food, warm baths, fresh clothes, beds. The first steps towards rescue were complete.
And they acted fast. The very next day, Worsley took one of the whaling boats back around the coast to King Haakon Bay to pick up the other 3 men who'd waited there after the boat journey.
But Shackleton's mind was absolutely fixated on the 22 men still stranded back on Elephant Island. They'd been alone now for over a month. He must have been tormented by the thought. Had they kept hope alive? Did they even know he'd made it? Or had they succumbed to despair? How do you keep 22 men hopeful in that situation?
He immediately started organizing rescue attempts. But the Antarctic winter was now in full grip. He tried 3 times with different ships. Each time, the thick pack ice surrounding Elephant Island proved impenetrable. The ships couldn't get through. They were forced to turn back. Months dragged on. Imagine the agony for Shackleton and the men waiting.
He pleaded with the British government for a proper icebreaker, the Discovery. His old ship, actually, but it would take weeks, maybe months to get there. Shackleton couldn't wait. He was relentless. He went to Chile, appealed to the Chilean government, and it managed to secure a small, sturdy steam tug called the Yelcho. It wasn't an icebreaker, but it was tough, and it was available now.
August 25th, 1916. The Yelcho, with Shackleton on board, set sail from Chile, heading straight for Elephant Island. One last desperate try.
And meanwhile, back on Elephant Island, what was life like for those 22 men? Frank Wild, the man Shackleton left in charge, he was instrumental. They survived. They overturned 2 of the remaining lifeboats, used rocks and canvas to make a crude shelter they called the Snuggery. They lived there for 128 days. They hunted penguins and seals for food, endured the biting cold, the crushing boredom, the constant gnawing uncertainty. But Wild, embodying Shackleton's leadership style, kept morale up. Every single morning, apparently, he'd make the men pack their gear and he'd climb a small lookout point, scan the horizon, and announce, "Pack up, boys, the boss may come today." Every single day, a ritual of hope.
But after 4 long months, 6 days, hope was fading fast. Morale hit rock bottom. Blackborough, the young stowaway, developed severe gangrene in his frostbitten toes. They had to perform a rough amputation with basic tools in the hut. The men were apparently just about to give up waiting. They were planning to take the remaining seaworthy boat and try to sail themselves to Deception Island, another desperate gamble.
And just then, literally as they were preparing to leave, they spotted a ship. Through the fog, a large ship steaming towards them. It was the Yelcho, and standing on the bow, unmistakable, was Shackleton himself. The moment of reunion. It must have been overwhelming. Against all possible odds, all 22 men left on Elephant Island were still alive. Wild's daily mantra had come true.
It's the ultimate triumph, isn't it? After nearly 2 years battling the ice, the sea, the mountains, starvation, despair, every single one of the 27 men who had sailed south with Shackleton on the Endurance returned home. Alive. It's just a true miracle of survival.
And it comes down to that extraordinary leadership from Shackleton, his sheer courage, his refusal to give up, but also the incredible determination and teamwork of the entire crew. They never turned on each other. They worked together. He failed in his original goal, yes, he never crossed Antarctica, but he achieved something far, far greater, far more miraculous. He saved every single one of his men. It's a story of human spirit, not conquest.
And there's a fascinating postscript, too. Just recently, in 2022, 106 years after she sank, they found her. Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, lying on the seabed, 10,000 feet down in the Weddell Sea.
Yeah, the images are incredible. She's astonishingly well preserved. They said the condition was absolutely brilliant. Apparently, the extreme cold and the lack of wood-eating organisms in those deep Antarctic waters kept her almost perfectly intact. You can see the name Endurance still clearly on the stern. It's like a ghost ship, a time capsule from their ordeal.
And Shackleton himself. His final resting place is back on South Georgia Island, buried there, overlooking the scene of arguably his greatest triumph, not the crossing of Antarctica, but the saving of his men.
Exactly. He didn't achieve the goal he set out for, but what he did achieve was so much more profound, so much more incredible, bringing everyone home against odds that were, frankly, astronomical.
The sheer willpower, the leadership, the resilience shown by Shackleton and his crew, it's almost beyond comprehension. So, thinking about this incredible story, what does it all mean for you listening right now, maybe facing your own challenges, big or small?
Well, it really raises a fundamental question, doesn't it? When you're faced with obstacles that seem completely insurmountable, maybe impossible, what deep reserves of strength, both mental and physical, do you think lie dormant inside you, just waiting for that moment, waiting to be called upon? Maybe think about that.